Welcome back to What Gets Measured, a NinjaCat podcast about marketing, performance management, metrics, and effectiveness, because what gets measured gets managed. I'm your host, Jake Sanders, joined as always by Jessica Grazer, VP of Marketing here at NinjaCat. We're swimming in data, but drowning in disorganization. As AI tools promise to make sense of everything, the reality is that most systems still struggle to find, connect, and interpret the information we already have. That's where information architecture comes in. This week, we're joined by Jessica Talisman, an information architect with over 25 years of experience designing data architectures, taxonomies, and ontologies for complex organizations. With a background in library and information science and a micromaster's in design thinking, Jessica has spent her career building the invisible frameworks that make information useful for humans and for machines. In this conversation, we explore how the principles of organizing knowledge have evolved from early digital libraries to today's AI ecosystems, why shared taxonomies are so hard to maintain, and how structured knowledge systems form the foundation for trustworthy, intelligent AI. If you've ever wondered why your dashboards don't agree, or how to make your data truly machine-ready, this episode's for you, so let's go. Jessica Talisman, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited. I've been watching your work, and I have to give a plug for Blamo because brilliant.
Blamo, for the audience, is a cartoon character I've created that takes all the blame in the world, and I put it out on LinkedIn. And Jessica Talisman and I have been having a good time talking about Blamo.
Everyone needs Blamo in their life.
I know.
So, yeah.
It's so sweet. We've been following your work. I mean, sure, Blamo gets some likes, but your stuff is flying through the roof of the LinkedIn algorithms. That's why I feel like I'm so happy that we got you and you managed to capture you. So let's talk about that, because that's why you're here. There's a lot of words that we're going to learn. And so, let us be the translator for the audience. But big picture, we're talking about organizing information. How has your approach, just talk from the ground level, evolved from early digital libraries, because you've been in the game for a while, to today's AI-powered ecosystems? Organizing information, give us the picture.
It's really interesting because I started in the late 90s with the Steven Spielberg project, which amounted to the largest visual history catalog in the world. It was called the Shoah Foundation for Visual History. So I started that job in 1997. And it was really it had an ontology backbone, and it was organizing long videos. It was a repository of over 11 and a half hours of videos about the Holocaust and World War II. So it wasn't exactly the most light topic. But we were breaking up using VHS tapes. It was brand new technology to chunk, remember the word chunk, the content into 2 to 6 minute segments, adding tags from controlled vocabularies so that end users could find anything they wanted in the 2 to 6 minute clips within this massive repository. It still exists today. And we see that sort of shadow cast into the future with AI. AI is new. Information retrieval systems and organization of information have been foundational to AI. It amounts to the way that we organize information in digital ecosystems, follows some pretty strongly codified standards, ISOs, that guide controlled vocabularies, thesauri, ontologies, for example. These are logical reasoning models. And these information retrieval and information organization models are to help machines and humans discover information. So within our digital ecosystems, fast forward from that initial job I had, and then working, within library ecosystems are responsible for these huge networked knowledge graphs for information retrieval. A lot of work that's been done there. We're starting to see more of these types of systems come to life in enterprise systems, following the same playbook, the same format, following the same standards and the same logical reasoning as librarians have used for decades.
That's the connection. It makes so much sense. And ontology, or Jess, you have this question. Ask this one
Yeah.
because.
Yeah, well, she just defined one of the terms. So, logical reasoning models, ontologies. But there's also terms like information architecture, taxonomy that get thrown around that, we work with marketing and marketers, and we have varying degrees of understanding of these terms. So, could you just kind of walk through how you define each of those terms, such as information architecture, taxonomy, ontology? How do they differ, and how do they relate to one another, and work together to really support better data systems?
So we have information architecture, which traditionally seems to have been relegated to human computer interaction and UX and UI type of work. However, that term and that role and the action of organizing information as an information architecture is still a little squishy. Essentially, information architecture is the act, obviously, of organizing information using codified frameworks. However, we do see a lot of information architecture that's simply designing the front end navigation experience, right? So there's two different sides. I like to say that I'm a full stack information architect in that you're considering the front end and the back end when modeling these systems. It's not so much about the user experience, although we take that into account, but the idea again is to create information architectures, which means robust semantic ecosystems. There's another buzzword, semantic, which means that there's context and meaning behind what you are modeling. The way that we imbue context into a system, I have coined as the ontology pipeline, which is a framework for organizing semantic systems. The reason for that is because of all the buzzwords. There's a scale of maturity when we're architecting information. And the scale of maturity goes from controlled vocabularies, agreed upon terminology that's defined and disambiguated. Then we move, and I put taxonomies next, which is organizing, which is technically also controlled vocabulary, but we mature a controlled vocabulary, the agreed upon terminology with definitions, into a taxonomy, which is a hierarchy. It's parent-child relations. That is supported by an ontology backbone that helps to maintain the structure so that machines can make sense of the hierarchy, the parent-child relations. A thesaurus extends the taxonomy, the hierarchy, so that we can start to have relationships outside of the parent-child relationships. And we see like a great example of a thesaurus is one that's able to reconcile terminology dynamically, accounting for alternative labels, which are generally synonyms, acronyms. We're trying to bolster a system to make sense of vocabulary and make sense of a taxonomy in a more dynamic way, right? What are the other words for this thing? What are other ways of describing this thing so that we can have that reconciliation system? And then we graduate to ontologies, which is a more expanded, more complex data modeling. So by going through these sort of iterative stages of maturity, we're able to manifest a beautiful information architecture that has semantic context and meaning.
Semantic context, meaning, I'm just sitting here like, so this is in reference to when an ad agency would come across this, you mean 7-Eleven, you mean 7-Eleven.
Right.
You mean, 7-Eleven, the store, you mean the date. So those are those things. And so that explains the semantically rich, which means context-filled. Foundation. Okay, so AI systems struggle if they don't have that. They're going to get it from the user maybe, but they should have it inside. Can you explain more about this structured knowledge systems and how it helps an AI make sense of data like it helps us? You just said it's for machines and humans together. So I just think there's not a lot of people talking about semantic rich foundations. You know, everyone's just like, AI's left the barn.
Yeah.
So, you know, like if they don't have this semantic rich foundation, what are they missing?
You know, we tend, you know, broadly the trend has been using context windows and chunking, back to chunking,
Chunking.
to lend context, which is where we're basically injecting what we think of as context in terms of like a phrase or a block of text that describes something. The thing is that, you know, the other half of that coin is we tend to surround that with not semantic systems necessarily, but with syntactic systems. So a lot of our internal systems, be it marketing, advertising, it could even be in e-commerce or in industrial, you know, spaces or finance, is that we present these syntactic models that represent our internal structures with our own internal speak and language for things. And we expect AI to be an oracle, to understand our syntax-rich systems without delivering the semantics, which are the explicit descriptions and definitions for things and relationship between things. So essentially that entire model, if we think of semantic expressivity in terms of it could be a knowledge graph, an ontology, a taxonomy, whatever it is about semantic expressivity. It's about describing, defining, and adding that rich context that is machine readable. So the code, the underlying code that is presented is what's most critical, is that we're not just giving some sort of SQL query, passing it through to an LLM, expecting it to be an oracle and manifest meaning out of our internal data structures, but we're turning our reasoning outwards. We're turning our our semantic expressivity outwards in order to describe our domains contextually.
Can I
So
ask?
are you saying that's, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jess.
No, so many questions. It's so interesting. So really, it's important for each individual kind of organization to be able to express those nuances so that they can make the most out of the AI tools that essentially make it speak their same language, is what you're saying,
Yes.
in a way to simplify it.
And what's most important of note is like AI models, the commercial ones, are trained on the open internet. And a lot of the training data and top training data they're actually knowledge graphs. An example is Wikipedia, Wikidata. Huge training source. That is a knowledge graph. You can download it in Resource Descriptive Framework or RDF JSON, which is the actual encoding structure for that knowledge graph. So our internal definitions and understanding and context-rich environments that amount to, for example, an ontology or descriptive context in the shape of a knowledge graph or a taxonomy or a thesaurus or even a controlled vocabulary. Our internal definitions may not match the external or the real world ideas of what these things are. I'll give some examples from the real world of marketing and advertising. Is like,
Yes.
how many of us, and I'm speaking to your general audience and you guys as well, are familiar with like Google keyword planner or AdSense,
Yes.
those sorts of things, right? When we organize campaigns and ad groups in that context, it's done using terminology, right? That's predetermined. That's a great example. And some of that is aligned with and is gleaned from Google, right? And Google's vocabulary for these things.
Sure.
Have you ever noticed how in ad groups with ad groups and campaigns or even in keyword planner, there's broader, narrower, broad match?
Yes.
That is ontological. Is just
Oh.
that whole back end and that's an example of an information architecture, an information organization system that has a semantic backbone that then is connected to algorithms. We're all too familiar with that from an advertising perspective.
Correct.
So if you can imagine building that same type of ecosystem, but to organize your information for an LLM. That's essentially what we're doing. And part of that activity is, for example, if a business defines accessories broadly,
Mhm.
and say that you're a sporting good company and you're talking about accessories. Well, in the context of sporting goods, your accessories are going to be very different than like a women's fashion instance versus accessories in electronics, an electronics instance. Accessories is one of those ambiguous terms. That's a great example of where definition and context means everything, because as you can imagine, like, the world can explode around accessories. There's so many accessories and different types of accessories. So it's really constraining and defining these things relative to what I like to call touching grass, is
Hmm.
making sure that your internal definition, if it strays from the common definition of a thing, that it is, one of the tasks and one of your priorities and focus points needs to be disambiguation, and making sure that you create, and it seems like doldrum and it feels like a pain in the butt, but creating actual definitions for the things that you're describing. And that adds rich context and meaning, but it also has it has multi-prong approach in that you're aligning everyone around this common terminology. Your deployments, for example, with AI can be much more streamlined. And if you have multiple AI instances operating within an environment, you have the ability to also have common data models in order to reconcile data points so that you can leverage AI.
So I have a question. It seems like a great connection with the if this then that kind of like that stuff is like we all know that, but we don't think of it as an ontology. It's a belief kind of. So if this is true, this is true. So I think that's really interesting that it grounded it for me, and I was like, oh wow, because me and Jess were talking before. It's like ontology, and I've talked to a lot of people ontology, and you're like, are there smaller words? Now, what you did is you compared it to something that we know. My question is semantic, rich foundations. You said some other disambiguation. Have you seen people do this stuff and not use these words to say that they're doing this stuff? Like, you've worked with people. Have you happened upon a client that just had an ontology lock but didn't refer to it like that? They had taxonomy lock, but they didn't refer to it like that. I'm just wondering if there's a way for the Joe and Jane out there to say, you're already doing this, you're calling it something else.
I mean, I will first just say that, half the internet is organized or uses schema.org,
Right.
right? That's an ontology. So if you're using schema.org or you're using Open Graph Protocol, which is
Big
Facebook's,
time.
right?
Yeah.
You're using an ontology, you're already using it. So call it for what it is, and you are on your way.
Well, but then like you've happened upon somebody who had a grip on that accessory breakdown. But they didn't call it a rich thing. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
we have been fighting this fight. It just feels weird because it's like, oh, let's also listen to Jessica Talisman right now because she's saying something new in the age of AI, and you're like, you should have been doing this, and if you had an e-commerce site, you've been doing this. I'm just like,
Well, and
go
it's
to.
something that our customers have struggled with because as they're pulling in, your example is spot on with Google has their framework for this is what a campaign, this is the ad group. And because they were first, many of the other platforms kind of followed that
Right.
framework. I might be using the wrong word,
No,
but they
yeah.
followed that grouping. And one of the things that we have tried to help to do, or that is a common problem among agencies and advertisers, marketers, is pulling that together to say, well, from this platform, it's called this. From that platform, it's called that. But I want to report on it as one, metric. It's called leads here. It's called conversions there, but I want to call it sales on my dashboard. And so that kind of mapping work is always ongoing.
We're
Yeah,
doing
the
it.
mapping work is, and I think it's, many of us think of it as boring and arduous, and can we automate? I mean, I think the most common response I get from people is, how do you automate this? I don't want to do it. But in my opinion, you have those things available in your dashboards, what you are calling things. I'll give you an example. Is, I worked for a big ad tech company that strongly partnered with Google. And the dashboards are everything to know what's trending. We operate very much in the world of dashboards for reporting and for reconciliation and for deciding where we're going to place our bets next, reliant on performance. Reconciling those dashboard schemes is most important, because I can't tell you how many times I've gone into an organization and there's fractures everywhere where you find synonyms, and I think that's where the real body of work is, that
Yeah.
Microsoft Azure, for example, is the same as Azure, is confirmed, and coming up with a system. And that's where I am a big fan of SCOS, which is Simple Knowledge Organization System. It's a very lightweight data model ontology backbone. And this is where we declare our hierarchy: broader, narrower, broad match. Sound familiar? But you can also then reconcile synonyms, because you have alt labels, and you can have multiple alt labels so that you can group. I like to think of it as like a vocabulary term wears a backpack. And in the backpack, its superpowers are you have your synonyms, your acronyms, all the things grouped together that are indicating this is the same. These things are the same things. Right. And I can't tell you how many times I've worked within these organizations where they are placing their bets on fractured data sets that are really
Yeah.
behind. And so therefore your bets are poorly placed.
How do they know if that it's
Absolutely.
fractured? How do they know if it's fractured? Do they not know? You got to do this hard work to figure it out. Oh.
They don't know. And that's the thing, is like and I think part of the symptom is that we hopefully are coming out of this era of build fast, break things. But the truth, would you want to hire a data modeler that builds fast and breaks things? If you think about it, like data models, like, do you want to risk breaking it or breaking things with your data model? Just, rolling the dice and seeing what flies. Secondly, now with the age of AI, we are looking at beyond data modeling. How are you going to present your business to a machine? What is your business profile? What is your business's persona? It's larger than just individual personas within. But how you present your business contextually, how you profile your business using terminology in this descriptive context is critical. If you say if you have a machine build your business profile, you're entrusting the machine to render something that's pretty personal, nuanced, which I think is pretty risky. So that's another part. So investing in the people and the upskilling in place to teach people how to build these models, to teach them to build controlled vocabularies and taxonomies.
Do you have examples? I don't know if you can name drop, but I'm just thinking of do you have examples of who's really doing this right, or in your current work, what are the kind of star examples that you might reference?
Yeah. I'll give an open example for everyone to go look at. It's called babelnet.org. And it's really a concept model in thesaurus, but it's super fun and very easy to navigate, but it gives you a sense of and it's something that can be leveraged, but it's essentially like a pretty knowledge graph, visual, interactive experience, but it uses all the Wikipedia and geo environments to reconcile data, to describe, define, and represent data semantically. So if you want a really great experience of that, then of course, and that will let you play with that type of model to have a better understanding of what that should look like. So that's my first one.
Me and Jess are just like, I think we're catching it. I'm so happy you're here talking to us. And my question is, it was about the assumptions that people have. I think this conversation that you're having, where does this thing mean what you think it means? You're using a synonym to describe this thing. It's very interesting because it's touching on literature, and me and Jess are now interested because we're liberal arts folks,
Excellent.
and you're like, oh, so it's about writing.
I was too.
Metaphors are controlling our world. And I think there's something about the assumptions that people have along every step of every journey. Why are you collecting the data? What do you need it for? What are
Yeah.
you know, and if you had a 3 why question, you know, for every metric on your dashboard, you would be crying. You
Yeah.
would be crying and you would be like, why are we doing any of this? So here, I just wonder, is the assumption, how do you get people to question their assumptions and not hurt their egos to the point?
Oh gosh, ego is the biggest thing.
But it's
Yes,
got to die. It has to
it has.
die. So
Yeah.
how do you get people to like check their assumptions and check their egos? I mean, that has to be insanely hard.
It's insanely hard, and there's a lot of pushback, and I have to believe part of it is because humans are creatures of habit.
Mm,
I practice yoga. I'm a yoga teacher as well, and I love the saying, "Humans are the slaves to bad habits."
mm,
Um, a lot of us feel overworked. I have to address that. And we feel overwhelmed and we're in our routines, right?
mm,
Of how we manage our day-to-days, how we manage data, how we manage marketing, advertising, whatever it is.
mm,
And so it's now because of AI, we are having to look at context a little bit differently. And the act of defining things within, semantic definitions, we all know the semantic layer, which has become pretty contentious in spaces, and trying to define what that is. So to challenge assumptions, first of all, is having to get off the treadmill of build fast and break things.
mm,
You have to be able to slow down enough to challenge assumptions.
mm,
The second is to have little wins. So starting small and building iteratively. Now, is something like a controlled vocabulary, building that a collaborative effort? Ideally, there's someone owning it within an organization, and the work should not necessarily be in everyone's face, but it's something that does involve governance and stewardship in that you're surfacing and socializing these models that you're coming up with that describe things. And the reason why I've come up with this sort of semantic maturity scale of controlled
mm,
vocabularies all the way through ontologies is because with the controlled vocabulary, you can do a lot. So the other way we challenge assumptions is by building a really low fidelity semantic model, like a controlled vocabulary, operationalizing that as a RAG, for example,
mm,
type of deployment, or using it with AI, that you're able to support inference, context, and meaning, and getting small wins over a very small POC or pilot. That gains trust. It gets people out of their assumptions where they can actually see the results once you introduce very even low fidelity semantics into a system.
I think that is actually was our last question that we were going to ask, was where to start, and you just answered it in terms of what we had teed up. People, it's overwhelming. Where can I start? And I think that advice is very sound with this or anything. You've got to iterate. You've got to
mm.
start somewhere, get some small wins, with proof of concept, and that will compound over time. Makes
Mhm.
And
perfect
it's
sense.
not one and done. That's the other thing, is choosing, like, don't boil the ocean. Don't try to design or model the entire organization all in one swoop.
Right.
Take like a small little sample, like you could choose health and medical or something as your vertical. And just take a subset of that, just health or wellness or something that will
Yeah.
have returns that you can actually see. Another thing that's important is socializing this with, if you have access or your company has machine learning engineers. Those are great partners because they would have a million uses for a taxonomy, for example. A taxonomy becomes a decision tree so that you can have a method for handling incoming new terminology. You can have like for machine learning, for example, for vector databases, if you have a taxonomy of parent-child relations, then you can have the vector operate and derive from that predetermined model that humans have determined in order to take those groupings or vectors and map them to the appropriate parts of your taxonomy. Like, you find your people, find your partners. The thing about AI is this is not, I see and experience a lot in companies where they've allocated and given the bulk of this information architecture, information organization work to machine learning.
Mm-hmm.
Is a subset of data science, to be honest. And so you're basically just allocating the work to be done to a very small subset of the larger data community. This is like a cross-domain, cross-team, collaborative effort that cannot be relegated to just this one small sliver in the small population of your ecosystem. This is something that is multifaceted, multidimensional, and does cross into humanities very much so. If we look at what humanities people are doing, we're defining, we're structuring. Like, this is something that is not necessarily just held down to very technical. There's so many layers to it. And so
It
you
will
need,
benefit the greater org. It's
Huge.
not just a benefit for one small department or team. It will, the ripple effects of doing that work in a cross org way make a lot of sense.
yeah, and you want to empower people, right? And that's a big part of it.
It's amazing because these past couple of guests we've had, highly technical, everything ends up at the reducible level, very durable, soft skills, things that we need, conversations that you need to have. So I love that this is the starting space, is just having a talk, having a chat, and questioning yourself, looking deep into the mirror. So people need to follow you. They need to connect. They need to learn more. How can they do that, Jessica?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I also have a consulting company called Contextually, which has Ontology Pipeline as part of it. And so I have a website, which is ontologypipeline.com, which is going through sort of an overhaul right now. And then I'm going to be speaking at some events coming up. So O'Reilly Data Superstream next week on the 13th, Connected Data London in November, and then Forward Data Conference in Paris in November as well. And then finally, I have a Substack. It's called Intentional Arrangement, my newsletter, and it's previews and little snapshots from a book I'm writing called Intentional Arrangement, which is just about information architecture, organizing of information, and ultimately, which we did not get to talk about, is the idea of knowledge architectures, which is kind of the next phase and stage of how do we go from just information to knowledge.
Well, we're going to have you back. Yeah, that's it.
Cheese or chocolate?
Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, update your schema. Here comes the knowledge. Cheese or chocolate?
Cheese.
Spring or fall?
Spring.
Oh, you said it like that? What's up with spring? Why do you love spring so much?
Because summer's almost here.
Oh.
And garden. I garden a lot.
Oh, so this is like you're kicking into high gear. Jess, what do you think? Are you a spring?
I mean,
or
she
fall?
lives in California for a reason. She likes the...
Her spring is different than ours.
Yeah.
A little different.
All right, here we go. Classical or jazz?
Jazz.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Love that. The angularity. What do you think, Jess?
Yeah, I would go jazz probably, but
Okay.
you know, I'm a music lover. I would listen to any of it.
Yeah, let's have it. Put it on. This is interesting. Robert De Niro or Al Pacino? You got to choose one.
De Niro.
Agreed.
I think you're right. Al Pacino's going to yell at us.
Yeah, it's too tense.
He's going to shout. Okay. Honk the horn often or rarely?
Rarely, because I'm in Santa Cruz. You don't do that.
You don't honk. I drove a lot in New York, and you do honk.
All the time. I just got back from New York. It's pretty intense.
They love a honk.
Yes.
Love a honk. But it's a courtesy honk. Boop boop.
Of course.
Jessica, are you honking it or no?
Well, only because my toddler loves to hear it. He's like, honk, honk the horn. But otherwise, no, I would not be honking the horn. I'm not an aggressive driver at all. In fact, I don't even like to drive. So
I have something when the four girls are in the car, and it's called the honk of justice. And I just honk the horn for no reason. And they're like, give us the honk of justice. And I was like, I can't do it when people are around because they think I'm honking at them. Anyway.
Yeah, of course.
You know what I mean? Honking. Yeah. In California, it's like, don't honk. Don't bring attention. What are you talking about? Okay.
Look-y.
Okay. And finally, maybe most contentiously, pancakes or French toast?
Oh, pancakes hand down.
Hands down. Oh, Jess, what do you think?
Anything I can slather maple syrup all over, delicious to me. So
So both? You can't choose both?
I keep doing that. I don't. I have a problem. I
Yeah.
can't pick. I want to be Switzerland.
I think
You
it's
are-
a
I like them all.
preparation because, like, yeah, pancakes, it's like a one swoop job. It's
That's true. It's easier to make for sure.
The prep is crazy on French toast. You're right. I'm so sorry I
I
asked
think
that.
that's why my mind went there because I would order French toast if I'm going to
I
brunch
would
because I
order
don't ever want to make it.
Because somebody's making it. That's the right answer.